behalf of the American Mathematical Society, let me welcome all of you to the Music of Mathematics. We have an exciting evening planned for you. Our lead performer today, Dmitri Tymoczko, is a professor of music at Princeton University, where he's taught composition and theory since 2002. He is a composer and an improviser, but also a music theorist who uses deep mathematics in his work. For instance, in his book, A Geometry of Music, he has used the theory of orbifolds to study the space of all musical chords. In addition to his professional accomplishments, I can attest that Dmitri's a delightful neighbor with an excellent taste in Belgian beer. Today, Dmitri will be joined here on stage by 8 accomplished musicians from the Philadelphia and New York City areas, so welcome to all of you, and who will demonstrate some interesting connections between music and mathematics. And we will also see a video by Adam Finkelstein, who's a professor of computer science at Princeton. This evening will be a combination of lecture, demonstration, and concert, featuring some very new technology that generates musical notation in real time. And with that, please join me in welcoming Dmitri Tymoczko to the stage.
Hi, thanks everyone for inviting me. This is really great. I was telling someone before the show, I've managed to remove both the geometry and the music from the geometry of music. So maybe some of you mathematicians, it's sort of Zen and Grothendieck, or where they overlap. Today I will be talking about math and music and playing some music. This is really exciting for me because usually when I need to demonstrate a musical idea, I either thumb through it at the piano or play a recording. And today we have something really awesome, which is great musicians who are here and in a really experimental and open spirit. The setup here is that this thing that looks like a piano is actually a computer that can both transmit and receive information. And I have written software that sends musical notation through the internet to iPads on the performers' music stands. So virtually nothing that they will be playing have they ever seen before. It is a high wire act, and it's something that would have been impossible even 20 years ago. So I just want you to appreciate the sort of daring that they are demonstrating here. The way I think about it is as a kind of technological telepathy. So rather than my introducing them, I'm going to ask them to introduce themselves through music. And give me just a second to make sure that my brain is on right. There are a lot of moving parts here. Finkelstein in the back. Let's just give them one more round of applause. Adam commented that the title of the talk is kind of backwards. Usually it's the mathematics of music. So we start with music and then we use mathematics to explain it. And I will be doing a little bit of that, but I realize that in this presentation, there's an awful lot of going in the other direction. So starting with a mathematical idea and transforming it into music, or thinking about how it can be made into music. So as I was preparing this, I thought about a simple musical idea, a simple mathematical idea that we could maybe make into music. And it's a good way to illustrate some of the challenges involved. So I'm gonna introduce, I'm sure many of you know this, the concept of the hailstone sequence, which is related to the Collatz conjecture. So the hailstone sequence is a very simple sequence. If you have an even number, you divide it by 2. If you have an odd number, you multiply by 3 and add 1. And you keep going to see whether you get to 1 or not. And the thing that's really interesting is that nobody knows whether you always get to 1 for every whole number. They've checked it up to, I think, at last record, it was 5 godzillion, but it might have been improved since then. So this is something that we can turn into music very easily. We can just number the piano keys, choose 1 to be 1, and then we can implement the hailstone sequence. And I will show you what this sounds like if you just do that. Or you can listen to. I don't know if show is the right word. So I think in this case, this is 1. This is 1. And this is, this is 2. And this is 4. 8. Odd numbers do this. Okay, so we see the problem, which is it sounds kind of crappy. So I'd say the big challenge in this whole area is that you can have a good mathematical idea that turns into a bad musical idea. And the way I think of this to myself is that music is the athletic manifestation of mathematics. Meaning it's a kind of mathematics that we do in real time with our bodies. And the trade-off for that is a lot more people, like music than like mathematics. But the price you pay is you have to stick to sort of a simple, basically have to stick to the shallow end of the pool, and you can't do any of the fun stuff that requires pencil and paper. So in this case, we can actually improve on the hailstone sequence quite considerably if instead of using all the notes on the piano, we restrict ourselves to a smaller set, say 6. So let me show you what that sounds like. Now it sounds like this. That's better. The reason it's better is basically twofold. The first thing is I am sticking to a collection of notes that just sounds good. If you use all the notes on the piano, you create a lot of dissonance. If you limit yourself to a smaller collection of notes, your ear can process the immense mathematical relationships between all the overtones of all the notes, and you respond positively. To understand the second part of why that sounds good, I'm now going to ask you to sing with me. We are going to sing the song Do a Deer. Is everyone ready? So here's where we're going to start. Do. 1, 2, ready, go. Do a deer. Well, that's not right. Do a deer. Sorry, I started off at the wrong tempo. 1, 2, ready, go. Do a deer, a female deer. Why are you guys not playing? Drop a simple song teaches us is, I'm sorry, I should be over here. What the simple song teaches us is something very important, which is that music takes patterns like do-a-deer and moves them along collections or scales. And this is a kind of arithmetical operation. It's essentially addition, and we will be coming back to that. So one of the things that makes music interesting is we take patterns and we move them up and down by adding or subtracting, but we move them not along a completely even collection like the piano keys, but an uneven collection like the white keys of the piano, where not all the frequencies are at the same ratio with their predecessors. So that is, I think, maybe the main source of interesting complexity in Western music, particularly since it turns out that this happens on multiple hierarchical levels. So we'll come back to these ideas. Now we're going to play a little piece based on the hailstone sequence, sonifying it and turning it into music. Once again, I have to look at my cheat sheet and make sure I press all the correct buttons at the right time. with the hailstone sequence, if you change multiply by 3 to multiply by 1, it's obvious you always go get back to where you started. And if you change it to multiply by 5, the loops come very quickly. And so the loops at the end of the piece, we're using the multiply by 5 variant of the hailstone sequence. Okay, so since this is a math audience, we're going to have a quiz. I want you to feel at home. So my question is, what are we doing now? Time's up. What was that? Anyone? Permutation. Very good. Permutation meaning reordering. So this next piece is based on the idea of permutations. And actually I'm not a very good keyboard player. I would like to get better. And I thought it would be good for my left hand if I practiced all the different permutations of 4 notes. But that got boring. And then I thought, maybe there's a way to squish them all together. You know, like there must be a smallest number of notes that you can play that has all the permutations in it. And this turns out to be a thing called super permutations. And so super permutations will also show up in this piece because it's a way that we can, you know, instead of tediously going through, the permutations get big awfully quickly. Yeah, super permutation is a nice example of a mathematical concept that fits very nicely as a finger exercise if you want to train your hand to make all the possible motions. All right, so our next piece is about permutations. And we start it just like we did. Okay. We got to sing again. Row your boat. 3 rows here, join on that side. No, 2 rows here on that side, 2 rows there on that side, row, row, row. Okay? You get row your boat? We start. Row, row, row your boat. And then they go. Row, row, row your boat. And then they go. Row, 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 row. Sorry, you came to the music thing. I'm getting paid. Row, row, 1, 2, ready, go. Row, 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 gently down the stream. Row, 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 gently down the stream. Row, merrily, 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 life down the stream. Merrily, 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 good job, guys. Okay, so why did I bring that up? Because row your boat is one measure of music. It's just literally, row your boat, gently down, merrily, merrily, life is but a dream, right? It's one measure of music, but when it repeats, what happens to the lines? They are permuted. That's right. The last piece was about permutation of notes. But where music gets really interesting is when you permute musical lines or entire melodies. And this is, in my view, one of the really core discoveries of Western music, the idea that permutation can be applied to larger chunks of music. It is what gives rise to rounds. The first rounds were written in about 1100, so at the real dawn of Western musical notation. And I think that the Baroque and Classical and Romantic eras are essentially powered by the discovery of what you can do with rounds, especially when coupled with transposition, which is moving things up and down the scale. So to demonstrate that to you, our next piece is really, truly a high wire act. We are going to improvise a kind of fugue. So I am going to play, this is one of the few pieces that uses pre-composed material. I've written about 4 measures of music, and I am going to trigger those measures. They will be played on my keyboard. So these guys don't really know what's gonna happen, and they are just, because they are such virtuosic musicians, they are gonna make music. And when I sent them the video to prepare for this, I said, I'm really not at all sure that we can do this, because it has never been done before. I've never done it, and basically it's crazy. And after about 15 minutes, we actually decided that we've heard worse. So in that spirit, we're going to share it. Now, I can do all sorts of things like start the wrong computer program because I forget what is happening. So I really need to. And I think in this one, I make no noise whatsoever. I'm just sort of there in the background. But for whatever reason, it really helps me, makes me feel better to keep my foot on this pedal. Do that. Is everyone ready over there? amazing. I think it's beautiful. I don't know if you think it's beautiful, but it is unprecedented. That is probably... a genuine first in human history that anyone has been crazy enough to try that. Okay, now we're going to go even farther. We're going to now use math to find out what's beyond the edges of the piano. And to discover this, I need to tweak some software settings here, I think. And if I do this wrong and forget, I'm gonna blast your ears in the next piece. So I really hope I don't do that. All right, so I've written a computer program. Let's see it's gonna take what I play and then just slow it down. There it is. Works for pretty much anything. Anyone know what dot, dot, dot is? Yeah, go ahead. It's a polyrhythm, or a hemiol. It's 3 against 2. So the answer to the question, what lies beyond the boundaries of the piano keyboard, is rhythm. What lies underneath the zone of hearable pitch is rhythm. And what that means, and here we get to really the deep mathematical basis of music, is that our very sensation of pitch is a sensation to rhythm that is happening at superhuman speeds, far beyond the speeds at which our motor system can react. So when we hear musical intervals like a perfect fifth, we are hearing a kind of rhythm that is happening 10,000 times a second, 15,000 times a second. And it really is a sensitivity to a mathematical ratio, and it's related to sensitivities that we share with animals. And now I've just remembered about that setting, so I'm going to do that before I forget. Setting change. Okay, so in this next one, we are going to be exploring the relationship between rhythm and pitch. And this will happen in 2 distinct ways. Way 1 is notes will repeat in proportion to their fundamental frequency. I mean, they're actually repeating at their fundamental frequency, but they will also be, low notes will be slower, high notes will be higher, and then the ratios of the speeds will be in proportion to their underlying vibrational frequency. So that's way 1. There's also another kind of interesting way, which is we will be dividing the measure in the same way that the notes you hear divide the octave. So the octave is a kind of circle, and if you play a chord and smush it into an octave, it will divide that circle into certain proportions. And the rhythm, the rhythmic measure, is also a circle, and beats on the rhythmic measure are also dividing the measure into certain proportions. And in this case, every chord happens at its characteristic rhythm. And if you listen carefully, I will tell you something cool about this. Okay, so those are the 2 things that are happening in this piece. And I personally really love this. I think this is the only piece that you're hearing tonight that I've ever done before. I just think this one sounds super great. Now we have to do a little bit of theory. Oh, I forgot to tell you. Okay, so in there's some cool rhythms. Like one of the rhythms that you hear is basically dot 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 dot. And this is maybe one of the world's most popular rhythms. It is a rhythm that in Africa is called the timeline. It is like, it's everywhere, it's ubiquitous. It's sort of the basic rhythm of, you know, an entire region of this giant continent. And it is 2-2-1, 2-2-2-1. And if you were to it lives in a 12-beat measure, and if you were to transport it onto our 12-octave keyboard, you would hear. So this African timeline is the white note scale transported into rhythm, which is kind of a mind-blowing fact if you think about it. And the reason it's there is because in both cases it's a matter of dividing 12 slots as evenly as possible into 7 pieces. And you want to divide the rhythmic world evenly so that you can dance to it, and you want to divide the pitch world evenly for complicated reasons that I'm not going to get into right now. But in that piece, you did hear that magical rhythm just coming out when I played a bunch of white notes. And so that's a kind of cool little subtlety. All right, for this one, I want to introduce you to some more facts about Western harmony. Basically, it's a cool thing that if you start with any melody on the white notes, you can pretty much move it by 2, and it will sound good against the original version. So that's like this. We can do. And if I just boost that by 2 piano keys, or an octave and 2 piano keys, that sounds great. And we can go 2 below. And so you can think of it as there being 3 parallel lines that are always present in Western music, and you always have the option, if you're on one, to hop on to the other. And so that's kind of a cool fact. Unfortunately, you might want to be able to go in the opposite direction, and that works okay for a moment, but then things get bad, and then they get good again. So there's just like a basic problem that with going in opposite directions, and it has to do with the fact that the white notes are not even. There are 7 white notes. So it turns out that if you remove a white note, everything gets kind of good again. Let's try that from here. And there are various tricks for doing this. You can repeat a note and slip in another. famous patterns like. And believe it or not, that music probably reminded you of one particular composer, Beethoven, basically discovered this trick that when you have an even number of notes, you can you can arrange them into even and odd, and if your even notes sound good together and your odd notes sound good together, then you can move very freely and everything will sound organized. So this next piece is based on the even-odd idea, and then the even-odd idea is going to come back in the piece after this. So in this piece, the harmonies always have an even number of notes, and the players are going back and forth between the even notes and the odd notes, and our amazing clarinetist Yuma Uesaka is going to what we call blow over this thing, so she will solo, and I think it'll be fun. So that's what you need to know about this one. I need to make sure I know what my buttons do. And somehow when I was explaining, wait a minute, I spelled it wrong. This is not right. When I was explaining what I wanted, the phrase bebop butterfly came into my mind. So that may also. pretty new. And this one's a little hard to explain. So I said that thing about the two lines, that you can always have a melody in, you know, it can bump up 2 white note keys or bump down 2 white note keys. Well, it turns out if you imagine just having a scale going on all the time, a really fast scale, and the option to bump up or bump down by 2, so imagine a kind of diagonal line that's moving through the pitch-time continuum. If the line is moving fast enough, then you can take pretty much any melody that you invent and you can put it on that line somewhere. And then you can take that melody and shift it arbitrarily along the line, and it will sound good with itself. So this is a trick that was known to the Renaissance composers. It takes the rhythm piece that was 2 pieces ago and the even-odd concept that we were talking about bumping up and bumping down, and sort of smooshes them together. And it kind of sounds dumb, like even and odd kind of sounds dumb to mathematicians who are like, you know, can you translate that into scheme theory for me? But it actually, so it sounds dumb in the abstract, but it sounds really good in actual music embodiment. So one of the tricks here is that you have to be prepared to accept the simplicity of good sounding music. And that's an emotional process that, you know, it's easy if you're not a musician. If you are a musician, it can involve a little bit of renunciation of complexity. So what I'm now going to do is, again, a little bit unprecedented. I will be triggering melodies sort of randomly or intuitively, I should say. And these melodies I composed ahead of time, and they're all slotted into this diagonal line on the pitch-time continuum. And I think you will, I call this piece Autobach, which is sort of like Bach, but also sort of like the Autobahn. And I think you'll hear why that is. All right. My computer code is called Infinite Cannons. I was at the Santa Fe Institute, and one of the mathematicians there was saying, well, it's really hard to compose music. You know, it's just, and the truth is, it's not that hard. What's hard is getting to the point where it's easy to compose music. But I think that's amazing, because that's basically an algorithm, right? I mean, these guys have immense amount of skill, but the algorithm can do a lot for you, and it's quite remarkable. Okay, now we are coming to our last piece. I would like to thank our musicians once again. Remind you of their names: Carlos Santiago, Melinda Rice, Tom Cranus, Andy Theoroff, Matt Engel, Tessa Ellis, Yuma Iwasaka, Mimi Stillman, Adam Finkelstein doing the visuals. So thank you very much again. So earlier we used math to discover what lies beyond the boundaries of the keyboard, but now we are going to go even farther in a mathematical spirit. What lies beyond that? We found rhythm is, below the realm of pitch, but what if we could imagine superhuman beings that could hear very low and very high sounds as pitches? And actually, we don't have to imagine. I think if I do this, and hopefully this is where I test that I changed that setting. So, for us, it turns out that silence is what lies beyond the edges of music. We sang Do a Deer, and we learned that addition corresponds to moving something up and down on the piano keyboard. But of course, we can apply addition not just to notes. We call that transposition in music. But we can transpose not just collections of notes, but we can also transpose notes and rests. So the rest is a musical object that if you add to it any finite number, it remains unchanged. And if you subtract it from any finite number, which corresponds to turning things upside down in music, it remains unchanged. And there is a mathematical object that has those properties, namely infinity. So this is a long story, but it turns out that there are a lot of good reasons for thinking of the rest, or thinking of silence, as a note that is infinitely far away from all the notes that have letter names, all the notes that could even be heard by a superhuman being that could hear any frequency. So this is something I've explored in a theoretical context, and our last piece, we can't really demonstrate it musically for obvious reasons, but our last piece is going to be metaphorically gesturing toward the idea that silence is a kind of infinity, and silence is the note at infinity. Wow. Okay. Thank you for coming out. That's our show.